Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
The philosophy and example of House of Hope, which receives no government funds, needs to be shared across our nation. Those who want to help disturbed teenagers should be able to know that there is a way, and that that way works.
And that way works. President Reagan, perhaps the most beloved president of a generation, admired for his simple understanding of things that work, loved for his gentle leadership, knowledge, his timeless wisdom. Yes, we all loved President Reagan, but what did President Reagan love? President Reagan kept a calendar of the 12 most important and memorable moments while he was in office. He chose, of course, the falling of the Berlin Wall. He loved freedom. Yet surprisingly, one of President Reagan's 12 most memorable moments was not even a part of his political legacy. It was the day he discovered and fell in love with the House of Hope.
When I was 5, I was sexually abused and my childhood was very rocky. When I was 7, I was exposed to pornography by my sisters. As a young girl, I had already been introduced to porn, sex, drugs, and abuse, and it all seemed very normal to me. In 6th grade, I lost my virginity and I was labeled as a slut. In 8th grade, I got pregnant and I was forced to have an abortion. I fell into a deeper depression. I started cutting, burning, doing more drugs, taking more pills, anything to stop the horrible pain. Soon drugs weren't enough. I started attempting suicide. My parents started calling me sick-minded and crazy. I started to believe what they called me. I went wild, and I got alcohol poisoning and I was raped. I fell into a zombie-like depression. My mother put me into a residential center for drug-free living. There, I got worse. She then sent me to House of Hope.
Hi, I'm Candace Cameron Bure, spokesperson for National House of Hope. For 25 years, founder Dr. Sarah Trollinger has helped parents and teens navigate through the perilous adolescent years.
One day, my mom, she tried to drown me in her own bathtub. Her hand was on my head, so I tried to grab her hand, try to jerk away, and I was like, I feel like I'm gonna run.
I knew what I was doing wasn't right. I just knew that I was either going to lose my daughter or find some place for her. And by the grace of God, I found the House of Hope.
Someone once said that vision gives pain a purpose. 25 years ago, I was teaching school in the Orange County schools, working behind bars at Juvenile Detention Center, and the same teenagers would come and go without any lasting help.
I remember sitting on the floor one day with a bottle of pills in my hand and scissors in the other hand and a razor blade, and I remember just crying and looking in the mirror and literally telling myself that I hate myself. I wanted to die.
Then as time went on, I'd take nails and I'd burn myself. I'd take razor blades and glass and I'd cut as deep as I could and just sit there while I watched myself bleed.
At least 4 years old is my first memory of being abused by a grandfather.
And the last thing was breaking and entering into an apartment that shocked me because I never thought he would ever get to that extreme.
Nick would be in jail. I might be dead.
It was frustrating to see that, like a revolving door, they would come and go and without any hope.
When I was cutting, I was just feeling how much hate I had towards my dad and my mom because I thought she didn't care.
I felt that I was never worth anything. I wasn't valuable. I felt I was a mistake.
One night I was praying. In my distress, I cried out to the Lord and I said, what are we going to do about this generation, about these hurting teenagers that aren't getting any help? And the Lord spoke to me in his still, small voice, and he said, Sarah, I want you to start a place and call it House of Hope.
And she said to me, what would you think if I started a House of Hope for girls? And I said, a House of Hope for girls? But then immediately I knew that if Sarah was even thinking about it, that she probably was going to do it.
We didn't have two nickels to rub together. We just just had this vision, but we knew that God wanted to have something really, really special for kids.
Love truly is the greatest of motivators. Sarah's mission really started within the walls of her own heart. She didn't walk away or give up when she knew it would take many miracles to make this dream a reality. She did something that the House of Hope is teaching many teens to do. She believed in miracles.
So I got together after the Lord spoke to me with 4 of my friends, and we had $200, and we started praying.
We prayed for vision, we prayed for land.
And continued to pray day by day by day.
And actually, the property on which House of Hope did begin came through a lady in a bookstore who happened to know a couple that had land available. But then it seems that soon thereafter we found out that the property had been sold.
And I said to her, have you sold your house? And she said, actually, I'm giving it to the real estate dealer tomorrow. And she said, why are you interested? And I said, well, I have a heart to start a place to help teenagers.
And Sarah visited them, and they had such a heart to have teens on their property and to have it sold for that purpose that they were willing to take the meager amount of money that we had. The lady wanted $117,000, which was like millions to us, and we only had that $200.
We got together and we wrote a grant, and we prayed and we said, Lord, how much should we write this grant for? And the Lord spoke to us and said $95,000.
The truly big miracle was that the Edith Bush Foundation never gave to faith-based ministries. It was just mainly to the arts and sciences.
And the lady calls me back and she said, I've talked to my husband, we've prayed about it, and if you want the property, you can have it for $95,000. And I said, we'll take it. And she said, but I need a down payment. And I said, how about $200? Well, she laughed about it and she said, okay, but in about 2 weeks when we go to the closing, you'll have to have the full amount. So the next day when I went to the post office, there was a letter from this foundation that said, we're happy to tell you that we're going to give you the grant, $95,000. And we went to the closing and they gave us the $95,000 even before we had matched it. And that was another miracle.
Touched by their amazing answer to prayer, Sarah's dedicated group rolled up their sleeves and turned 2 old homes on a dirt road in one of the worst parts of Orlando into Sarah's vision for the House of Hope.
I remember early on when we had 4 girls in the program, and Rick, my husband, was called during the night to come down to the campus because the girls had run.
This is about 3:30 in the morning, and I said, they've run away. You mean all the kids, all the runaways have run away from the runaway shelter? They said, yes. I said, I'll be right down.
And he threw his clothes on and took off as fast as he could to get to the campus. When he arrived there, he jumped out of his car and he heard giggling behind the bushes. And he knew immediately that the girls were hiding there.
And so I said, girls, you really need to get inside right now. 3:30 in the morning. They took off.
And I ran that night. And I was not familiar with Orlando. I had no idea where I was going to run. But I ran and I ran and I ran.
I-4, the major highway, was really close by, and they started to run down and toward the highway into a bad section of town.
And there we were, and I was running, literally running after these kids. They said, Rick Chambers, what have you come to? You were literally running after runaways in the middle of the night. So anyway, I finally reached them, and I said, what is going on? They said, our parents never would have run after us like this. I said, well, we care and we love you and we want you to be safe. So come on back home. It's going to be all right.
And that was my turning around, was that at that point I decided I didn't want to run away. Whatever was here, I wanted, and I wanted to accept it, and I wanted to wrap myself around it and allow it to take control of me.
6 months before House of Hope started, I was praying and journaling, and the Lord said to me, House of Hope is going to attract kings and government officials and queens and people in high authority. And I went back that night and read what I'd written down that morning, and I sort of chuckled to myself because here we are, no place, no money, and to think that there would be people in high authority coming to House of Hope. And so about the same time, President Reagan was coming to town to dedicate Epcot. And Charlie Reese, a syndicated columnist, had called me and said, I'd like to do an article about you. And it just happens to be next Monday when President Reagan's coming to town, but he'll never read the article because they fly him right in on Air Force One. He'll be there 2 hours, and then they'll fly him right back out. Well, we got together and we prayed. Our intercessors all got together and said, Lord, somehow let President Reagan see this article about House of Hope.
And the President of the United States just happened to pick up a copy of the Orlando Sentinel en route back to Washington from Orlando. And he read about this coverage of this emerging ministry, this really tiny ministry. And when he read that House of Hope received no government funding, he said, now that's my kind of ministry. So he took out his checkbook and wrote a check for $1,000 and sent it to us.
That hit the front page of the next paper the next day, and volunteers started coming out of the woodwork. We had volunteers to cook, volunteers to work in the school, volunteers to pray. Every place was filled with volunteers.
I have always deep down resented the idea that God should be expelled from the classroom because somehow it was an invasion of the secular life.
But it wasn't long until I asked Jesus into my heart. In a short few months, my views and actions were revolutionized and my life began to rapidly change. Jesus has given me a new beginning. I am a born-again virgin and I'm saving myself for the man God has for me.
He did raise you up.
When I was younger, I played a teenage girl on television that came from a very unusual family environment. But regardless of the problems and trials we faced, we could always count on a happy resolution at the end of each show. Today's teenagers can't count on that happy ending. Pain and despair that stems from sexual, emotional, and physical abuse is so overwhelming that they lose all hope.
When I would cut at night, and I would just get anything from the kitchen or from my dad's workshop, and I would just take blades and knives and just cut my arms really deep. And I didn't always know what to do, and I would just cry sometimes myself to sleep, but I wouldn't want to show people that I was hurting. I wanted to be the tough girl. I didn't want people to think that I was very sensitive, and I didn't want to be known as like a crybaby, so I kind of hid my emotions all the time.
I remember going in the bathroom and going in the cabinet and taking out a bottle of pills.
It was a release of anger. It was a way to punish myself for not being good enough, for the shame that I felt from the sexual abuse.
I just hated my family.
Because I was so hopeless, I wanted to die.
We liken ourselves to an EMT, emergency medical team, going to the scene of an accident. And when a teenager comes to House of Hope, they're in pretty critical condition, like the person is that the EMT goes to. They check to see if there's any life. And if there's no life, they give them a black bag. At House of Hope, we don't ever give up on anybody, even though they look pretty much like they're dead on arrival when we get them, because there's not much life in them when they come.
The inspired formula created in the heart of my friend Sarah Trollinger has produced a life-changing design used every day in every life at House of Hope.
This whole idea of helping teenagers come to a place where they can experience safe haven relationships, where there's somebody who's secure in their life that can help them repair the negative images that they either have about themselves or the negative images they have about other people.
You know, I guess working with teenagers is probably the hardest ministry today, because there's so many problems and so many things they're facing today that a generation ago didn't have to worry about.
I love House of Hope, how they love you unconditionally. That was what changed my heart, was the love that I felt when I was surrounded by love at House of Hope.
There were nights that I could not sleep, or I would fall asleep and wake up in terrible dreams. And there were house parents that would sleep in the room, in the chair, and just comfort me and let me know that they were there and that I was safe.
House of Hope is a great place for me. It turned my life around.
This place has changed my life, and I know that when I leave here, I'll be a stronger person. You know, obviously God has a plan for me. If He spared my life all those nights that I was drinking and driving, and you know, I never OD'd, I never got alcohol poisoning, and I never got a STD.
House of Hope is exactly that, hope. And before we got here, we didn't have any.
House of Hope is truly a place of miracles, a place filled with God's love, a place of hope, a place that's totally dependent on caring people like you to help save this generation.
It's so much easier to abuse a child now because of our technology. Abuse has become even more widespread and more rampant. And to know that these teenagers go through thoughts of suicide, and to know how much depression they suffer because of the abuse at another person's hands, it's almost incomprehensible to think about what goes through their minds and what goes through their hearts, and how their hearts and their souls have been affected. To know that House of Hope is there to restore the innocence and to restore the hope and to help take off the chains of bondage that these kids are in, because they are in bondage. They're in bondage to the memory of that molestation or to the memory of the rape. They're also in bondage in different ways, in the fact that they're cutting themselves or abusing drugs or alcohol. And to know that there are people who believe in them at House of Hope, to know that there are people who say, you are special, you are loved, you are beloved, and God has a special plan for you. That Jesus came, that they would have life and that they would have it in abundance. And it's impossible for a victim of abuse to believe that they could have life in abundance. But to see their faces of joy as they come to realize this, that abundant life really can be theirs, and those chains really can be broken because of the power of love.
Through the years, House of Hope's story has drawn hundreds of visitors to its doors. Some were famous, some history makers.
Isn't it amazing that such a tiny ministry caught such attention so early on? And soon the business community said, what is this House of Hope all about? And so we were interviewed in all the individual channels in town, and the word got out. And eventually, we had the very, very first humanitarian banquet, and President Reagan was the first one that we decided to honor, since he had been so instrumental in helping us get the word out about House of Hope.
President Reagan, in 1988, you made a very special video, 3-minute video, which I understand you had done for no other nonprofit ministry, asking people across the nation to look at House of Hope as a model for other houses of hope to start across the nation.
Lives can be successfully rescued from drugs, sex abuse, prostitution, pornography, and abortion.
Both of you have been the catalyst which helped get the House of Hope started. He came that afternoon. The whole Interstate 4 was flanked with Secret Service men, and just people were swarming all over the place.
And so they came, and bodyguards, a whole mess of them, about, I don't know, 15, 20 of them it seemed, came in and checked all the rooms out before the President and Nancy came.
You know, the Reagans came down to House of Hope today, and they stayed 1 hour with us.
We ended up in a great big common room with the Reagans sitting on a couch and all the kids on the floor, and our teachers and my wife and I and Sarah.
And they laughed with the girls, and they sang with the girls, and they cried with the girls.
And it was like the grandparents had come to visit for a couple of hours.
Happy birthday, dear Reagan. Happy birthday to you.
When I met Ronald Reagan, I remember how gentle and humble he was for such a powerful man in the United States. And I thought that was so neat, that he was so gentle and so kind. He was like a down-to-earth guy. He really was.
One of the highlights of my life and confirmation of what the Lord had said to me, that we were going to be visited by presidents and kings and people in high places.
I'd like to present this very special award. It gives me great joy to give it to both President and Mrs. Reagan.
Because this institution takes no government aid of any kind, it is free to deal with the soul as well as the body of its clients. That's why it's so effective.
When I was 18 years old, I shared my testimony with Ronald Reagan for House of Hope, and it was a life-changing experience.
Really, there were so many miracles that happened here on a day-to-day basis. Sarah loves to tell these stories, and there is one in particular, the cheese story.
They love grilled cheese sandwiches. And one day, we hadn't had them for a while, and they said, why can't we have grilled cheese sandwiches? And we said, well, we have to pray for the food to come in. We just haven't had any cheese lately. And they said, could we pray tonight and ask the Lord to send us some cheese tomorrow? And so they got together that night and they said, Lord, please send us some cheese. The next morning, on the kitchen table was a 50-pound hoop of cheese, and nobody still knows who brought it, but we know who sent it. We know where it came from. So these things just build their faith when they see God in action, knowing that He cares about them and that as they stand on His promises, that He will fulfill their prayers and meet their needs.
The epidemic of violence is a critical national problem. Teens witness the destruction of their families and feel helpless as their one strong base completely deteriorates. They are essentially blinded by each day's sorrow. Bullies, drugs, self-mutilation, even sometimes suicide, become their escape from the pain of their reality. And it happens in the best schools, to the best families. It can happen to anyone.
That's 3,000 kids a day will see their parents divorce.
It was very easy for me to hide everything from them. So what happened when she told him that she wanted a divorce, he fell into a deep depression. I was 15 years old when my dad committed suicide, and after that, I had nothing. I had any thread of cares that I had for myself or for anybody else were all cut. And I went wild. I went so crazy that even the friends that I had that were all just like me, all gang members, they even started backing away from me because I was just doing horrible things and things that they weren't ready to do. I mean, like I said, I was into crack and heroin, and most 15-year-olds aren't doing those drugs. And I was robbing people. Just if I was walking down the street and there was somebody there, I would hit them and I would take whatever they had. At 15 years old, I didn't care.
Yeah, I was in one gang. I was in the Bloods. It's a set GKB, and I got into that when I was around like 13, 14. 14, I started smoking, and I smoked for about until I was 15. And then from there, I started trying other stuff like cough medicine and popping cough pills, like cough medicine pills, and I started doing that and started not in my right mind. I didn't really necessarily label myself as a bad kid. I just felt like I was influenced by the wrong people, and I really got misled. And I started doing things that I really shouldn't have done, and I was under the influence of drugs, so I made some poor choices.
Finally, we got to court this 4th, 5th time. You know, he's been on probation for 2 years, almost off, and he ends up doing this, and I was like, at this point, you're gonna go to jail.
I got locked up for burglary.
They were like, we don't want your son to go to jail. They're really good to me, and that's how they found the House of Hope. And if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't know where to go. And I thank God for them, because he'd probably be in jail at this time.
40% of America's kids woke up in a home where their biological father does not live.
Thought it would be fun to break into somebody's house and rob their house.
I cut, I pierced, I did whatever I could to hurt myself.
I remember trying to fashion a noose out of a purse.
Today, 1 in 3 girls will have been sexually abused or violated by somebody they were supposed to love or trust by age 18.
I remember being 5 years old and being sexually abused by someone close to the family. From that time on, I just remember being very angry. I didn't know how to express that anger. I became very depressed, sad. I got in more physical fights than I could count. I was always suspended from school. I didn't have a lot of friends because I was just angry. I didn't know how to reach out to other people. When I was 9 years old, I started drinking, and that kind of became an outlet. I used drinking to cover up all the emotions I had, and I felt better doing so. I would get it either out the refrigerator or, you know, from friends of the family. When I was 12 years old, I remember being so depressed and sad and not really knowing what to do. I remember going in the bathroom and going in the cabinet and taking out a bottle of pills. And I figured if I wasn't living anymore, it would be easier for everybody.
The statistic for boys is that 1 in 6 boys will have been sexually abused or violated by somebody they were supposed to love or trust by age 18.
I was abused by my stepfather from the age of 5 to 12.
Felt like I had to fit in with my friends, so I felt like if they did something, I did it.
We are more socially isolated than we've been in the past 25 years since they've been keeping record.
I was an inner city high school teacher for several years, and during the course of that time, I had a student that came through my doorway that was just beautiful blonde hair and bright blue eyes, and just fell in love with her. But I told her, you're hanging with the wrong crowd, and you need to really take a look at your life because you're in trouble. And I was in a secular high school, so I only knew I could go so far. Her first day of class, she came to class, and while other students took a break, she sat down beside me and she said, Miss Hill, this is going to be a good year. She said, I've really tried to change things around. She said, I've even recommitted my life to Christ. And I said, good, let's make it a great year. And the next day as I came into class, a teacher stopped me and said, have you heard? Sherry is missing. What I did not know was that night, 5 of her so-called friends abducted her, took her to a field, beat her, stripped her naked, shot her, set her on fire, and then urinated on her. And my whole life changed. At that moment, I thought, Lord, there's got to be more. This isn't the way a story should end. To this day, I am not only fighting for the freedom for a student that doesn't have to be murdered, but for those that are in bondage, that we be the voice to say, you don't have to live like this.
When they don't have a secure base relationship, they're going to be misguided in the sense that they're looking for safety somewhere else.
Sherry Hartman, I love you dearly. You will be the first one I look for in heaven. But there are students here on earth that I need to go and get. And I believe that's her mission to me is, Miss Hill, don't give up. You didn't give up on me. Don't give up on the others. I love Sarah Trollinger because she looked at me one day when I met her and she said to me, why don't you start a House of Hope? And I love the fact that she calls things into existence. I was blessed to ask to come alongside and start a House of Hope in Indiana. Because of that, my goal is to see teens safely home.
These kids have been through everything imaginable. These kids have been through things that some of us can't even imagine.
Became so depressed, I didn't know anyone, and I made friends with all of the drug addicts and drug dealers in school, so.
Some of them have very difficult family life situations. Some of them have just been pushed in their school or friendship areas and in directions that they don't want to be in.
But let me tell you something, she was at a point where, I mean, she had tried to commit suicide twice. And so she was at a point where she almost lost her life, and we almost lost our daughter.
She would try to be so good, and when she was good, then she just couldn't hold it. So when she was going to be bad, she had to go to the other extreme. So she had highs and she had lows, and when the lows came, it was really a bad and scary time around our house.
She eventually, I'm not sure when it all started, but she eventually got into drugs and sex and robbing cars and houses and things like that. And it was pretty difficult on us. We didn't know a lot of it at the time. One of the reasons why she had a lot of difficulty is she has a younger brother, a year younger than her, that has Asperger's syndrome, which is a high-functioning autism, and so he would embarrass her at times and just get a lot of attention from us, and so that caused a lot of anger for her too. So she had a lot of frustrations in her life, to the point where she was she was hospitalized 3 times, 2 times?
3 times.
3 times at behavioral centers and for cutting and drugs. And then she, I guess the big moment was when she had threatened her brother, saying that she was going to kill herself and then kill him in his sleep. And things got violent around the house, and so we decided that she just couldn't live with us anymore. Her hatred towards so many people. I remember her telling me over and over again that I don't know what I'm talking about, that the world is a horrible place. The world, and she kept telling me it's a kill or be killed. Sometimes you just gotta kill people so that they won't kill you. And I said, that's not real life. That's television or the movies, but that's not real life. And she really, truly believed that. And it was scared. It was scary for us. I was scared for her. It was terrifying, and it was heartbreaking too, for her to have no hope. I think that was I think that was the point that I was trying to make to her and to everybody, is that she had no hope. We started forcing her to go to church with us again, and she would sit in the pew and write horrible language, horrible things all over her, all over the bulletin for the church, and it just broke my heart, because I knew that she used to just love Jesus and love the Lord, and part of that seemed like it was lost and gone.
As a mother, when I receive a phone call from a mother who's crying out for her child, I know that only God can restore that child. And He does, and He has the perfect plan for every child that He brings to House of Hope.
Every one of these kids was a dream in God's eye before, the foundations of the earth. But they get into the world and they don't know what that is. They get into the world, they can't find their way. And the families haven't been trained, and many of the parents don't even know what destiny was laid out for them. And until we bring them into that place, they can't support their kids into getting into their destinies. And I think that's what God wants, and that's the whole vision of House of Hope.
It's amazing to see the process that God brings the young people through. When they first get here, you could see anger, you could see bitterness, you could see loneliness. A lot of times you could just see them just really question, can I trust you?
Actually, the first 2 weeks are pretty tough, because most of the teenagers are pretty used to going buck wild, as they call it.
The judge, as part of my probation, said that I had to complete a program. He allowed my mom to pick the program. And she heard about House of Hope. And she talked to Miss Sarah, and I came here. And when I came here, I was still really hurting.
And so when they realize that this is a safe place and I can be vulnerable and I can share my hurt and my pain, and I won't be judged, I won't be criticized.
And it's amazing that when you see them put their trust in God, how their eyes now fill with love, with hope, with purpose. And I love to see them, I love to see that transformation take place.
There is an actual God-given strategic plan from the hand of heaven handed to Sarah to take these girls and these boys step by step how to rebuild a broken life.
When parents and teens connect with House of Hope, they can expect their world to be rocked.
They're all hooked into social media, they have their own computers, they have their iPods, and when they come to House of Hope, they have to give all those things up, because we're focusing on them to change them from the inside out.
They can expect the lies that have been told to them to be exposed.
The hardest thing was all the rules. Every single rule, everywhere you look.
I basically was just very, very angry that I was here when I first got here.
Every teen needs to know that somebody's crazy about them. When they come to House of Hope, their emotional love tanks are empty, and they're craving some attention. I always go out and put my arms around them and hug them, and many times they push me away because they aren't used to that.
It's a radical change for the young people when they come here, because I think they don't know how to handle the love and acceptance. But that's what makes them feel safe, and that's what we want, of course, because that way they will be more eager to open up once they feel good and safe.
But once they've been there for a while, they get in the routine. They love to know their boundaries.
We got a lake back there. I really love fishing, and that's what I like to do. I fish out there every day.
What we give them is structure and safety, really, is what it is.
House of Hope is safety for me, for anyone here.
It's security for them, knowing what they can do and what they can't push their mom or dad to let them do.
We really showed them how to build a home of hope.
Here I'm learning how to find something to make me happy instead of doing something to make me happy.
And they weren't just concerned with getting me better, but they were concerned with really curing me.
How you work through conflict, how you walk out forgiveness, how you encourage one another and support one another in what God wants us to do and what God wants us to accomplish.
They talk about transformation in the body of Christ. And when I came to House of Hope, I got transformed. In high school, I took rigorous courses before I came to House of Hope. And because I had so much going on inside, and also I was a procrastinator, I didn't do so well in those courses, but House of Hope got me back on my feet with high school, and I graduated here, got a 3.0 GPA, and now I'm going to college.
I was able to get through high school, get back into high school, and get through it and graduate on time with my class, even though I was a year and a half behind.
And then all of a sudden you can see in their face lights up. The light bulb turns on.
And we see phenomenal results there, because some of them have not been able to focus in school before they came, and some jump and gain as much as a year and a half in 6 months' time.
Everyday living skills, art, music, and physical recreation encourage a bright future. Yet, in the midst of their well-rounded education, fun is not left out.
Without a trace, no gray, no more gray. So God, I pray. So take the clouds away. No gray, no gray.
The fundraisers that we have a dinner each year, we have a golf tournament, and we have a fashion show. And the fashion show is so critical for the girls to be able to have a good self-image. They are so excited getting dressed up in a dress like they've never had before and being able to model and to feel like they're somebody special.
Please welcome the founder of House of Hope, Sarah Trollinger.
The girls love it. They count the days. They have their hair all fixed up in a different way. They have their nails polished, and they get up on the stage and model. And the parents, they love it. And I'll say, your eyes are so pretty, or you have beautiful hair, or find something. And they look at me, and I've had girls to say to me, you know, when I came in, I didn't trust you because I thought you were lying to me, because I've never had anybody tell me that.
This was the best fashion show I've ever been to. You are a testimony. You are an ambassador for Christ. Sarah, you are an amazing woman and an extension of God's hand.
Much of the accomplishments of House of Hope are due to Sarah's passionate dedication to repair relationships and reconcile teens with their families.
Our mission statement is Malachi 4:6. Turning the hearts of the fathers and mothers to the children, and the hearts of the children back to the fathers and mothers, lest there be a curse on the land. And so that was the last thing God said in the Old Testament. And that's what we're doing to fulfill the purpose that He's called us to.
Because this institution takes no government aid of any kind, it is free to deal with the soul as well as the body of its clients.
We tried the secular type counseling for at least 2, maybe 3 years, with different counselors and everything, and clearly that wasn't working.
Biggest things I learned, not to rebel and to honor your father and mother.
The parent has to commit to coming to counseling at least one time a week, and then they have to come to parenting class.
One of the things I found that was really helpful here is that not only do we have parenting each week, where everybody as a group goes, you had individual counseling with counselors.
And then visit their teenager every Sunday afternoon.
It's not just me that they're focused on, but they're focused on my family and truly healing the entire family.
Because what we know is if we don't help the parents change as the same way we're helping the teens change, the changes are not going to be sustained when they are back living together, because they're going right back into the same issues.
Since 1985, Sarah and her devoted staff have given teens and families hope. Thousands of broken lives in turmoil, pain, and despair have been given something to believe in. Circumstances that were intended to steal innocent dreams, destroy families, and end lives have been turned around and used by God to save those very lives.
House of Hope is effective because it deals with the spiritual aspect. It deals with what's going on inside your mind, soul, and spirit.
That's why it's so effective. It reaches the individual in a special and meaningful way.
That I didn't cry up until this night, and God just was washing me clean, and I mean, I really felt like He was too with my tears. I was crying so much. And I was saved that night. That was a real point of turnaround.
The Lord has done so much for me. I can't even begin to explain it. I was so lost and so hurt, and He just came along and just swept it all away. And
everyone here just embraces each other and accepts them where they're at, and just really brings them to a place of healing.
Because our whole thrust is family reconciliation, bringing healing and wholeness to the family.
As someone who's in an industry that gets so glorified, I want to glorify you guys. Well, I first met Sarah at an extraordinary women's conference that I was speaking at, and I didn't even know that this place existed for troubled teens. And Sarah came right up to me and she said, "Candace, I want to tell you about the National House of Hope." And if you've ever met Sarah, you can't help but listen to her. And so Sarah talked to me about the House of Hope. And she said, "Candace, so many of these girls look up to you. And I would like you to be our national ambassador for the House of Hope." And I said, "Sarah, give me more information, tell me everything, but yes, I will."
Wouldn't it be wonderful if we were able to see such an effective idea spread clear across the nation?
There's a growing number of people who are answering God's call to start a House of Hope, which is fulfilling Sarah's vision.
I see no reason every city couldn't establish its own House of Hope to deal with the teenagers who are in trouble. And those are not idle words.
Just ordinary people with extraordinary prayers, just like Sarah Trollinger.
People started hearing about House of Hope and what we were doing in Orlando. And I started getting phone calls as I would be on television and on radio, and I was speaking across America at different events.
And so we had been praying for about 3 months, and Dana asked me, "Have you ever heard of House of Hope?" And so as a matter of fact, I have.
So I went to the website, and there on that website was every single thing the Lord had shown me in my search of how to start a faith-based nonprofit.
And I just started weeping. I just knew that the Lord was calling me to the House of Hope ministry.
National House of Hope is the catalyst for starting houses of hope across the nation. We at National House of Hope offer 2 training seminars a year. And the people who attend these seminars are the visionaries, the people who have felt God's call to answer this call and start a House of Hope. And they share His heart and Sarah's vision.
And as soon as we set foot on the grounds here, we knew that House of Hope was what God had called us to do. So we started House of Hope Minnesota.
The advantage really of their coming here is because they actually are on the campus of House of Hope Orlando and can witness for themselves the ministry running and also see the teens, and this is one of the highlights for them.
And we came and visited National to see if we wanted to affiliate with them. Here we are.
I see people coming into the destiny that God has for them, and I see it hold, and it never held before.
Because I believe in the ripple effect, and every life we change in turn changes another life, and in turn changes another life, and it just keeps going on and on.
The House of Hope was the way that Christ intervened in our lives, my son's life.
We at House of Hope, we have become more visible now through our training seminars and people starting Houses of Hope, and they're focusing in on our program because they are seeing a program that really works, that's getting to the root of problems without government support, totally trusting God for our income, and healing America's teens and families.
These teens won't be written off on a list of sad statistics. Many have moved on to lead successful and productive lives.
Now, since House of Hope, I have completely given my life over to God. Prayer groups and worship teams, and I help in the kitchen for the homeless, and I was recently married, which was a huge thing for me to actually find somebody who was willing to give me a shot and accept my past and accept the person that I was and realize the person that God wanted me to be.
Well, I graduated high school with the 3.8, high honor graduate from D's and F's. This is the turnaround, you know, that can happen at the House of Hope, which was amazing. I went from D's and F's to A's and B's, graduated with high honors, and went and joined the Air Force. I went on to get my BA, double major from University of South Florida, psychology and criminology, and after that, I went to Webster University, and I got my master's degree in mental health counseling. And because of the things I learned at House of Hope and the love and the experience I gained at the House of Hope, I hope to one day actually start a House of Hope on my own so I could give back to other hurting teenagers, because I feel like I was there and I know what they've been through, and I would love the opportunity to pour into them what was poured into me at the House of Hope in Orlando.
Sarah will unashamedly tell you the secret to her success is Jesus Christ.
But once they find the love of God and the love of the staff and the love of their parents, then that's totally a whole new young person that evolves.
House of Hope works because it's God's heart for healing and restoration for His children and His families.
And people don't realize what they can do. Just like the book Do Hard Things, you know, what a teenager can do is unbelievable, and I have faith that they are going to change our country.
We start seeing a change in their lives, and that's when we see them start to work on leadership skills. We believe that they're going to be our leaders all across America.
House of Hope is a faith-based organization. No one has ever turned away due to lack of financial ability. Caring people who have seen House of Hope's amazing results and have a heart for hurting teens make it possible for House of Hope to continue this vital outreach.
If ever I saw anyone who was put by God on this earth for a purpose, it is Sarah Trollinger.
And the moment I met her, I was attracted to her passion, because there's something about that kind of passion that's just contagious. And as she told story after story about those teenagers whose lives have been devastated and wrecked by abuse or addiction, it was so awe-inspiring to see the love that literally swells out of her.
Sarah Trollinger is one of my favorite people on the planet. I have known her for 22 years now. I've always stayed in contact with her. I love her. She truly is an example of what a Christian should be.
And if she didn't have that vision years ago, where would my daughter be today? You know?
That's right.
But I mean, it's an amazing story, an amazing woman. She's really done something else.
She sees the best in everybody. I wish I could do that. She sees what God sees.
And the bottom line, it's hope.
where would we be without hope? That's it.
So Jesus is the center of the House of Hope. Everything revolves around His goodness, His love, His kindness.
Now it's time. It's time for you to take what you've learned.
My goals are to be a mechanical engineer, get my auction license where I can buy used cars and fix them up and give them to parents, single mothers who don't have cars, so they don't have to drive the bus.
And use what you've learned and your resources, time, money, whatever. I'm asking you to lay it all down and help other families in similar situations.
Enable us to look beyond our Orlando area, well beyond ourselves, and to think big.
Seeing a young person in bondage is probably the hardest thing. When you see those chains start to come off, and you see their eyes start to light up and the darkness leave, and you see them smile and radiate God's love, it takes my breath away.
Without God, nothing is possible. I believe that you can do all the secular programs in the world and get nowhere.
Sarah is doing something in her lifetime that will live far beyond her. Her legacy will not just be in the children that she loved, but it will be passed on to those children's children.
To see Sarah being able to put her arm around a teenager as they tell their testimony is one of the neatest things in the world. I literally pictured Jesus putting His arm around us and saying, "Well done, good and faithful servant."
I didn't have any dreams. And so as a senior, being here at House of Hope and realizing that I could begin to dream and that God's hand was on me.
It's the old me and the new me, and I'm really happy with the new me.
To me, like, if you're here, you're chosen.
House of Hope is truly the safe haven that teenagers need.
See the outpouring of the Holy Spirit. 24 years later, He looks out for the fatherless and the widows, and I'm fatherless, so He's looking out.
I was surrounded by love at House of Hope, and I could feel it the moment I got there.
They really encounter a living God.
Praise Jesus and praise God and thank Him for everything He has done.
Not only are you, Sarah, working on the cure, but you are also helping with the prevention. So thank you for being a safe residential haven of hope, where the lives of these teenagers are restored and healed. You and your devoted staff are indeed picking up the pieces of young broken lives and putting them back together. I challenge citizens in major cities in every state to look to the House of Hope as a model for similar homes for hurting teenagers across the nation.
Are you weak enough to care? God's word said that in weakness we are made strong, strong enough to reach out our hands, drawing strength from the only one who fills lives with light, strong enough to pick up the wounded when they fall, not to let them drown in despair. We can become light to others in this dark world. Love is the way, and that way works.
House of Hope is a lighthouse to distressed families everywhere. My fellow Americans, House of Hope needs your prayers, your commitment, and your services. Our young people are our most valuable natural resource and America's future.
Please know that no teen is ever turned away due to lack of finances at House of Hope. The work that they do there is incredible. It's awe-inspiring to see the love and the hope and the passion that they instill into all of these teenagers. And I can understand so much about what these teens go through because as a child, I was molested by a neighbor. And what I would have given to know that there was a place like House of Hope out there that would have looked me in the face and said, you know what happened wasn't your fault, and you are loved, and God has a special plan for you. If you feel as if you would love to start a House of Hope in your area, we have resources for you. If there's a hurting teen in your life, we have powerful, life-changing resources that we would love to get into your hands. I ended up with a life that I never dreamed possible. As a child of molestation, I never imagined that I would write a book that would end up as a television movie. I wrote The Christmas Shoes that became a movie for CBS television. The Christmas Blessing was also a TV movie, and The Christmas Hope. I wrote a book called Finding Grace, which was my story of molestation in a humorous yet touching way, about how God's grace has the power to transform lives, because grace really does change everything. If you have been touched today by what you have seen about these transformed lives that are taking place every single day at House of Hope, I encourage you to give to the National House of Hope Scholarship Fund. And please know that your donation doesn't just affect that one teenager. Your donation has the powerful ripple effect to touch countless lives. It's not just one life we're talking about. It's the lives of their children and of their children's children. It's the lives of their parents and their grandparents. It's these beautiful lives of hope and restoration that take place because of your gift. As a thank you, I would love to give you one of my books to thank you for your gift of love that you're making into the lives of these teenagers at House of Hope, because it really is the power of love that will change each and every single one of these teenagers' lives. When you give to the House of Hope, you're putting love in action, and the gift of love changes everything.
There's a love that never gives up in a house called hope. There's a peace that is hard to interrupt, though the devil keeps trying.